4-point game. DeJulius puts up a three. Yes! And a goal!
Time for Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network, presented by Bet Online. I'm your host, Russ Heltman. He's my co-host across the way there, Neil Meyer, both of us with Bearcats Talk, and Neil with Front Office News as well. We are coming to you on a New Heights live show day as Travis and Jason Kelsey get ready to take over Fifth Third Arena and ignite some great energy into the campus down there in Clifton. We'll talk about that to start the show, plus new transfer portal happenings. No signings yet out of the Bearcats. We had Sage Tolentino enter the portal this week, opening up a third roster spot and just leaving just one true big man on the roster right now in Aziz Bandago. Dive into that topic as well. And then we'll give our defensive storyline that we're looking for going into the spring game for football on Saturday. But first, got to tell you all about Bet Online, which is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoffs. All the latest stats, news, and scores are available to follow your favorite teams at Bet Online. Get the latest odds and lines, plus the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. Neil, big day. New Heights live show coming to town. I wish I could have put a parlay on, or put a bet in on them moving the event from Nippert Stadium to Fifth Third Arena, just given the forecast and the logistical issue there. But they're going to try to fit everybody in the Fifth Third, and some big guests, including Joe Burrow and Orlando Brown Jr., and who knows who else might show up. Will we get a Taylor Swift sighting? That is what everybody is wondering right now as we get ready for the big event.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great day in Clifton. Obviously, this is going to be a fantastic event. I think everybody knows what this podcast is about, but having the opportunity for them to come back here to Cincinnati and put on a live show in front of everybody who has been behind them, supporting them throughout their college days, throughout their professional career, I think it's going to be an electric environment, Russ. I think it's going to be one of those events or memories you take away and you remember for quite some time. But Fifth Third Arena is going to be rocking. Obviously, they're transitioning from the turf to the hardwood following the inclement weather. But, man, it's going to be exciting, Russ. And plus, anytime you can get guys like Joe Burrow and Orlando Brown there as special guests, obviously two high-profile names along with Travis and Jason, it's something that hasn't been done frequently, and it's going to be real electric. Obviously, the New Heights podcast is the number one podcast in the world, and it's going to be electric. The Lambaby games, that athlete roster, Russ, looks pretty stacked, if you ask me. That's going to be an interesting thing to see, and see our good guy in the athletics department, Zach Swain, get to run it back and maybe win something in the Lambaby games. It's going to be a fun night for sure. Great community event, way to get the people involved. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah, New Heights, obviously one of the most popular sports podcasts in the world, and they have sold out the event because of the move from Nippert to Fifth Third Arena. They're not selling any more seats as of now, except for very limited VIP seating, which I believe is still getting funneled out as we speak, about 6 hours preceding the event right now. You got a 7 p.m. kickoff with the Lambaby games. They're going to have a brief intermission about an hour and a half in at 8:30, and then the live podcast featuring Joe Burrow, Orlando Brown, and more at 9. Going to be a full night at Fifth Third Arena, and very, very interesting. Almost entirely general admission seats. So it's going to be kind of first come, first serve. The campus is opening. The parking lots are at 3 p.m. today. So big stuff happening on the campus of Cincinnati, and we'll see just who happens to funnel in from the surprise guest ranks on this podcast. Excited to see that. Just excited to see kind of what they have broken down with the Lambaby games, as likes of Jizzle James out there, Jillian Hayes headlining the athlete team, and then they have the academics, the students on
Can't forget
the other
Dante
side.
Corleone as well.
Dante Corleone.
Dante's out there too.
he is a part of the Maybe Games team. Going to be a lot of fun, and Neil and I will be there to cover it all for you guys. So make sure to follow the social media feeds for all of that. No video allowed at the events for media covering it, but we can give you guys some pictures, and we'll just be tracking everything happening. Should be a lot of fun. What has been a lot of fun has been the transfer portal. New happenings there. We'll get to the latest with the transfer portal, as the Bearcats now have 3 scholarships open on the table right now, and some big decisions to make when it comes to the front court and what option they want to go with in terms of the scoring guard in the backcourt. All that coming up on Bearcat Blitz. Neil, we had a new entry to the transfer portal out of the Cincinnati ranks. As we get back to you on Bearcat Blitz, catch us on Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. We are available there, available on Talking Cats with Russ Heltman, the YouTube page as well. And we'll be back on, hopefully be back on Valley Sports Ohio once the seasons in football and basketball kick back up in the fall. So when we look at the scholarships that UC basketball currently has at their disposal, 10 used right now, Neil, 3 scholarships remaining, and they also need to fill one of these assistant coach roles. We'll see if they do end up filling it with a 4th assistant coach on the bench alongside Wes Miller at the head spot and Chad Dollar at the associate head coaching spot. One true big man, unless you want to count Tyler McKinley, which I'll count Tyler McKinley, but one true big man that's seen college basketball experience on this roster right now, Neil, after the exit of Sage Tolentino.
Yeah, and that's a gaping hole right now, Russ, because I think we talked about it earlier throughout the season. A lot of people were banking on Jamil Reynolds playing alongside Aziz Bandaogo for 2 years. But Jamil jumps in the portal, goes home to USF. Sage jumps in the portal, and then Victor Locken jumps in the portal. So Aziz Bandaogo is the only one returning in the front court while he tests the draft waters. But Sage Tolentino played just 20 minutes in his career. Obviously, he redshirted 1 year, but fantastic person. But Russ, as we talked about, they were trying to improve there in the front court, and it was something that probably a lot of people saw coming. But it's a sight to see right now. One player in Aziz Bandaogo, it's clear what they're going to have to do there in the front court. They're going to have to target a big man, whether that's a 6'11" center, a 6'11" power forward. But they're going to have to find that depth there because you know what Aziz Bandaogo brings to the table. And overall, it's a gaping hole right now, Russ. And I think we saw what Tyler McKinley was able to do at the 4 and the 5 throughout his high school career, but it's how does Wes Miller and them want to utilize him coming into the freshman season? Do they want to potentially play him at that 4, that stretch 4, or that 5 position? But he's a guy who's capable of doing it. But there's still a lot of things, a lot of question marks because you never know with the NBA draft waters. You never know what could come out of the transfer portal. I mean, the dead period just ended, and I think everyone knows that it ended yesterday following the Final Four. So visits are starting to ramp back up. Names are starting to rumble. And things, you never know how quick this thing could get going. But all we're saying is fans need to stay patient like it was last season. We said it on the last episode. But saw how the portal played out last season. Simas Lukosius didn't commit until almost June. So have to kind of think about what this transfer portal could be like, but it's going to take time.
That it will. And you'd rather them take their time and go through the process and make sure they're getting the right guys, the right kind of head on their shoulders, the right kind of culture fits for what they've already established over the first 3+ years here under the Wes Miller regime. And you got to just hope that no team makes the smart decision, Neil, and gives Aziz Bandaogo a 2nd-round draft promise, because that's exactly what I would want my Hornets to do. I would want, if I'm the team, any team in the NBA that is not firmly solidified with their center position, they should try to go after Aziz Bandaogo and get him on the upswing of his trajectory in his career, as opposed to where he's going to be peaking next year, which I think he's going to add to his offensive game. He'll never be a true threat offensively, in my opinion, but that's not what you're drafting Aziz Bandaogo for right now. You're drafting him as one of the best rim protectors in the sport of college basketball that translated right from Utah Valley to the highest level of the sport in terms of, what was he, at 1.7 or 1.8 blocks per game. And that's in a season where he kind of had to go through limbo, like we were talking about on a couple episodes earlier, of him not knowing where he would be and not being stably firm as part of the rotation, part of the team from the first tip of the season all the way through the end. So I don't think he's going to get one of those promises, Neil. I would be a little surprised if that ends up happening, if he's not part of the roster next year, but it's a possibility. He is testing the NBA draft waters right now, made that a part of his statement. And if Aziz Bandaogo goes, Neil, you're in big, big trouble. Big, big trouble. I don't know how they're going to be able to, with the total coffers of NIL money that they're slotted each cycle, going to be able to replace all that talent. And on top of this, Neil, they need to be getting guys, in my opinion, at least one of these 3 transfers that they add with these open roster spots has to be a multi-year player. Has to be a multi-year player. Mm-hmm. When you look at the scholarship sheet right now, going into 24-25, it's pretty dire when you think about the future of this roster staying together. Dede Thomas gone after this coming season. CJ Frederick gone. Simas Lukosius gone. Aziz Bandaogo gone. CJ Skillings planning to leave as well. Or not CJ Skillings, Daniel Skillings, excuse me, planning to leave as well. And if Jizzle James keeps on his trajectory and looks as good as he did in high minute allocations last year, that could be an NBA player as well. You could be looking at half the roster, Neil, either graduating, using the rest of their eligibility, or going to the NBA. Needs some kind of bridges to the next couple of years of Bearcats basketball to go along with Rayvon Griffith and Tyler McKinnon.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, if a team...
this is his last year going in, right? Last year college eligibility.
He should have a red shirt available, if I remember right.
He does.
But right, either way.
They have at least Frederick, Lukosius, Bandaogo, and Skillings are all planning on leaving after this year.
Yeah, but either way, you're still losing significant amount of this roster after this upcoming 2024-2025 season. You're seeing the talent of players that Wes Miller and the staff are bringing in. They've continued to reload each and every year, starting since they came to Cincinnati in 2021. But overall, Russ, I mean, we're talking about it. You got to get a multi-year transfer this cycle in the portal. I think it's kind of clear that they know that they have to do that. But it's just going to be interesting to see who they're targeting or what kind of caliber player they're bringing in. Obviously, we talk about a big center or a big power forward. Do they go after do they go after 2 of those? You never know. Like 2 power forwards, stretch 4s, 5s, whatever they might do. There's a lot of different opportunities and options that Cincinnati can go. And that's the best thing about the transfer portal is you never know what will happen. But if Aziz Bandaogo decides that the NBA is right for him at this moment, Russ, after testing the waters, they're going to be in big trouble, as you mentioned. And they're going to be relying heavily on a guy like Tyler McKinley as a freshman, which would be very hard for him at that 5 position, especially in the Big 12. Obviously, you give him a full offseason in the weight room with Coach Rayfeld, which will be great for him. But just having some sort of depth behind there in the front court, behind Aziz Bandaogo, is what they are significantly going to need heading into the 2024 season. And it has to come via transfer portal, in my opinion. And I think everybody knows that. But it's a significant position of need right now for Wes Miller.
That it is, and we have some positions that have been contacted. No big men as of this current recording right now. New ones to talk about, and unfortunately, the St. Joe's Transfer Center, Christ Esendoko. I can't land on the right pronunciation there, but he has committed to Providence, so he is off the table right now. As Cincinnati has also reached out to Oklahoma State transfer guard Javen Small, former East Carolina player, 15.1 points, 4.1 assists, and 4.7 rebounds on 44% shooting last year, 37.4% from deep in the 23-24 season. I think he would be an awesome addition at 6'3", would be a really, really fantastic way to kind of solidify that backcourt. And a guy who maybe further along and a more likely candidate than Javen Small, Kirk Risa. A guy UC was interested in last year, goes from Arizona, commits to West Virginia, does not pick Cincinnati, goes through a season from HE double hockey sticks in Morgantown, West Virginia, where they just had injuries all over the place. You go through a coaching change abruptly. You go through
the 11 games
guys trying to get it. Yeah, just suspensions, guys trying to get eligible. It was a whole mess. But Kriisa, through all of it, averaged 11 points, 4.7 assists per game, shot 43% from the field, 42.4% from deep. Played pretty well against the Bearcats, was okay in spurts, didn't exactly light him up, so to speak, but still drawing interest from UC and scheduled to visit Cincinnati either Sunday or early next week sometime after he goes through some other visits with, I believe, St. John's. Yeah, checking out St. John's on Saturday. So, Neil, I think either one of these guard options, Kriisa or Javen Small, would be solid additions. Kriisa, interesting because I don't believe is an American citizen. I'm not exactly sure on that, but if he is an international guy, one of those players who unfortunately for him, he can't get NIL, but fortunately for Cincinnati, they don't have to worry about that player taking out a big chunk of their NIL slotted funds.
Yeah, and it's great to know that we're mentioning Kerr Kriisa because for many fans who remember this cycle last season, Kerr Kriisa did take a visit to Cincinnati last season through this transfer cycle, and then he reopened his recruitment after all the stuff went down with Coach Huggins in the summer, and Cincinnati was heavily in the mix. So to hear that they're back reaching out, it's definitely a situation to monitor, to say the least. And obviously, everything he has dealt with this past season, a coaching change, the suspension, to injuries, and to still have that kind of season that he put up. And there was games where he might have not affected the game much in terms of scoring and the offensive things, but there was games where, Russ, you're looking down and he's having 8-9 assists. And that's the kind of point guard Cincinnati needs. It's a veteran point guard. There you can have him off the bench. It gives you a lot of different options behind Jizzle James and Day Thomas. But also, Javon Small has been very familiar with Cincinnati, dating to their time back in the AAC. He's been a guy who has torched Cincinnati quite a few times. We saw it with ECU. We saw it with Oklahoma State this season. And Russ, seeing him firsthand in the Big 12 Conference Tournament and the AAC Tournament over the last 2 years, he has taken leaps and bounds from where he was compared to 2022 to 2023 to where he was to 2023 to 2024. Averaged nearly 15 points a game. He's a bigger guard, 6'4", can really shoot. Could also be that guy who gives you solid defensive efforts there at that position. Could he be that guy that comes in and kind of might fill that role of a John Newman defensively? You don't know. But it's definitely those two guards, Russ, I think are going to be two priority targets for Wes Miller and the staff, but it's definitely two names to keep an eye on. Obviously, Kerr Kriisa is slated to visit St. John's heading into this weekend, and per reports is set to visit Cincinnati following that visit to St. John's. And Javon Small has been in Cincinnati, same situation as Kriisa. Cincinnati reached out to him last year in the portal. He chose to go to Oklahoma State. Now he's back in the portal, so it's going to be interesting to see how those two play out.
That it will, and Kriisa, he's not going to give you John Newman type of defensive end back. We're not going to expect that from him. It's hard to expect that from anybody you bring in out of the transfer portal. It's just that they're John Newman type guys. They're expensive. Yeah, they're expensive. They're hard to find. They don't grow on trees. And Kerr Kriisa, as I mentioned, a guy that not necessarily going to take up a chunk of that NIL funding, coming over born in Estonia, went to high school in Lithuania, and performed very well. Was the hardest slate of teams he's ever faced in his entire career. And as Neil just mentioned, solid at the free throw line as well, 77%. 42.4% from three on CMOS Lukosius level attempts, 6.3 attempts per game. So what he will give you defensively is solid. It's not amazing. It's not great, but he makes up for that with efficient shooting on the outside. And Neil, I think he could take an even bigger leap in this offensive system, just with the depth that will be around him in UC, maybe a little bit more 5-out type of offense. Maybe we'll see that this year, depending on what they do with the big man portal, opening up the lane a little bit more, allowing him to continue increasing that 2-point percentage, which went from 39.4% in 2023 to 44.4% in 2024. So steady increase there. I think Kriisa would be a nice way to round out this backcourt. But Neil, if you add Kriisa, you're in a brutal situation next year, especially if Jizzle James pops off to NBA level talent. with your backcourt. You really just have Day Thomas. You would hope that he sticks around, that he would still be around there. And then not much else. Rayvon Griffiths, you kind of say so, but other than that, Neil, you're completely, you got nothing left in the guard coffers. You're going to be looking to the transfer portal again to fill most of those ranks, along with, I'm sure they're going to add a guard from the class of 2025. There hasn't been a basketball 2025 commit yet. Those usually start popping off late spring at the earliest. So we'll see what happens there. I'm sure that's one of their big focuses right now, is making sure that guard depth stays bridged for the future. But very interesting to see them set up that visit with Curtis from West Virginia. The latest with the transfer portal on the basketball side right there. And we'll get to the spring game defensive storyline that Neil and I are most interested in to wrap up the show right now on Bearcat Blitz. Closing out the show here on Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online. Switching from the hardwood to the gridiron as UC gets ready to showcase the 2024-2025 roster. The spring roster ready to get more work in on Saturday in front of Bearcats fans far and wide. Free event, the spring game is. So come out and check the team out in action just at the paper parking. And check out a position group that I'm very interested to see what's changed in this Tyson Bite defense out of the linebacking core. Linebackers were not great last year. Let's be honest. The worst was the secondary, specifically the cornerbacks, then the safeties, and then you kind of just move from the back of the defense all the way up in terms of performance last year. The linebackers slot right in just behind the defensive linemen and the defensive ends who played decent in 2023. They did their jobs, but nobody could really tackle out of that linebacker group. They missed tackles all over the place all last season. It felt like they were kind of out of position a lot. There wasn't a lot of continuity. There wasn't a lot of communication going on, and it led to a lot of issues in the middle of the field. Dorian Jones returned. Jack Dingle returned. Jonathan Thompson has made a lot of impact plays. He made some impact splashes to close 2023, and I believe Thompson will be a starting level snap player in this rotation of linebackers in 2024. Trevor Carter also there as well. Simeon Coleman, the freshman, has made some impact plays. Carter, a redshirt freshman there. Simeon Coleman, a true freshman. Don't expect to see much from him, but maybe we will, because, Neil, they're going to have three linebackers on the field really as the base defense moving forward here, as opposed to, and especially that star position linebacker, kind of that hybrid safety linebacker that was moving all over the field last year. That's going to be more of what I'm assessing, more of a back end type of player than 2023 and 2024. A guy that's going to be more set in one role as opposed to flying all over the defense and having to cover a lot more ground. Overall, I'm going to be watching the linebackers a lot out of this Tyson Bite defense. And I'm going to be watching, especially that star position, how it's tweaked a little bit in this spring game and just what that defense looks like after only a little bit of time to take in the new system from Tyson Bite, and a system that they were kind of spoon feeding to the players throughout spring, according to the comments from Bite and head coach Scott Satterfield.
Yeah, and that's a very great point to make on, Russ, is talking about this linebacker group. Obviously, we saw what they were able to do a season ago, and there was some holes in that defense. But with the new defensive scheme, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, especially with guys like Jack Dingle returning, Dorian Jones returning, and Jonathan Thompson as well. But for me, my focus is the secondary. I think obviously people do realize, Russ, how much the Bearcats secondary struggled last season. They allowed arguably, I believe it was top 5 in the most explosive plays in the country, if I remember right.
Yeah, it was at least top 10 most.
And you go out and you do a complete overhaul in the secondary in the transfer portal. You bring in 8 new defensive backs. Derek Canteen has really impressed throughout this spring. A guy like Zaravion Johnson, a true freshman, has impressed. Obviously, He's got the nickname Gravy for a reason. And the secondary, Russ, Armani Arnold, Kai Stokes. Look at the guys that they were bringing in there in that secondary. Not only do they bring in guys with experience and the leadership, but there's a lot of talent there in that secondary room where they could shock a lot of people. But obviously, it's going to be interesting to see how that group comes together and how they respond from a season ago. And if they can put it all together, I think this secondary could really make leaps and bounds from what happened in 2023. But the secondary, Russ, I think that was the biggest point of emphasis in the transfer portal this season was how can they improve there in the secondary. They go out. Kai Stokes was the big addition. Derek Canteen was a big addition. Armani Arnold, who still has 3 years of eligibility left, a big addition. Overall, I'm really excited for that secondary, Russ. I've been very impressed with what I've seen throughout spring ball, but I think that future is bright. And with this defensive scheme that Tyson Vike's been running, it could get pretty interesting to see how this thing plays out and what this defense can do.
That it will be very interesting on Saturday, and it kind of ties our two together right there. You picking the secondary and me acknowledging kind of the shift from a star position backer closer to the line of scrimmage to a star position player closer to helping that back end, taking away some routes in the middle of the field, just still covering the run, still setting the edge in that sense, and still defending the run there, but having more of a keen eye on we cannot get blown apart with explosive plays. We got to have another extra body there, not at all times necessarily, but as part of your base defense, as part of your base principles of what you're going to do, making sure that secondary has enough help to where you can just put Dante Corleone in the position and the role and the get up field and get that quarterback, baby, type of attributes that he showed in 2022. Same kind of position. Dante told us that a couple of weeks ago. He is very excited to hear it. And I think that's a way that UC could up their interior pressure this year by switching the role for Dante and just letting him use that giant frame to get after the quarterback and get after runners at that. We got to get out of here on Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online, Bet on Fun Show. We'll be back to recap the spring game next week.
This is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a three.